Hello there. If you enjoy hearing historical events in story format, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the H-Files, where we specialize in discovering the untold stories. In today's episode, I'll be telling you about a rather infamously ruthless and cold-blooded pirate that sailed the seas in the golden age of piracy, and how he met his bloody end. So sit back, enjoy, and don't lose your head. This will be my last fight, he thought, as he opened his eyes from the short nap he had taken. He stood up slowly, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. Perhaps this is for the best, he said to himself, as he stretched his back, feeling the discs in his spine pop back into place. After all, he had been suffering from a nasty disease that was killing him slowly, but that was not the problem. Rather, it was the tortuously agonizing way it was doing it. It had become so bad over the last few months that he had taken to injecting his own genitalia with liquid mercury, which was believed to kill anything it came in contact with. He had hoped it would kill the disease before it killed him, but all it had done was cause him more pain and brought death ever closer. He pondered on a man's death. A man should have a say in how he dies, he thought. He knew most men die like mice. They squeal till the very end. He had seen it countless times. But there did exist a rare few that popped tall, held their heads high, and roared like a lion when death came calling. When these men shed their mortal coil, they went with such a bang that it reverberated and echoed throughout time itself. This was the way he had chosen. He was already a living legend. His very name instilled fear and terror into the hearts and souls of all those who heard it. Today was the day he would etch his name into the sands of time itself. He meticulously loaded his 6 pistols, which he called hand cannons, and slid them into the hand-sewn holsters on his black leather vest. With a gentle tap on the handle of each pistol, he knew that this day would be the last time they ever roared. A grin spread across his face as he looked down at his hatchet, gleaming in the dim light of the flickering lantern on the table. He picked it up, sliding the blood-stained wooden handle under his belt, preparing it for quick and easy access. His most beloved fighting tool, a cutlass, had been sharpened to a razor's edge. It shimmered in the dim light of his cabin, ready for the battle that awaited him. He knew, with each swing, it would create the illusion of lightning bolts. Streaking out from his hand, he reverently picked it up and slid the blade between his sash and his belt. He put on his black captain's hat. There was only one thing left to do before heading out to see his men. As he grabbed the long cannon fuses, he began to think back on his childhood, and he asked himself the very question all men ask at some point in their life: how did I get here? He was born in the early 1680s and was named Edward Teach. However, most pronounced it Edward Thatch. His mother insisted on Edward receiving a good education. As a result, he was able to read and write proper English, French, and enjoyed reading original Latin. His mother had hoped that he would settle into a respectable career, such as the law or theology, and he had tried to follow her wishes, but his spirit longed for a freedom that just didn't fit into his mother's dreams for him. Eventually, that call of the wild proved to be too irresistible for him, and in the late 1690s, he left home for the seaport in Bristol. He took a job as a sailor and began learning the trade. He soon found himself in Jamaica, taking jobs on privateering vessels, raiding Spanish fleets. His unmatched courage and boldness had gained him infamy as a young pirate. Edward next found himself on the island of New Providence, a thriving pirate port, where he signed up with Captain Benjamin Hornigold. The captain quickly grew, impressed with young Edward, moving him up in rank and assigning him new tasks to learn and complete. Finally, the day had come when Hornigold gave Edward one of his own ships, named the Revenge, and made him captain in early 1717. His first time out as a new captain, he managed to steal over 100 barrels of wine from Bermuda, as well as took the cargo from another ship called the Betty. After Hornigold's pardon came in from England, young Edward found himself in charge of the island and all the pirates who anchored there. But Edward was not content with just taking over the island. He captured the French naval frigate La Concorde, which he renamed Queen Anne's Revenge, and loaded it with 40 more cannon to make it his flagship. With this impressive vessel and his cunning leadership, he became an unstoppable force on the high seas. However, this was also the time when Edward contracted syphilis, the deadly and painful disease that was slowly killing him. Despite his aversion to killing, he knew that he needed to maintain his power and reputation as the most ruthless pirate around. Thus, he created a terrifying persona that would strike fear into the hearts of anyone who dared cross him. He tied cannon fuses in his beard and long hair, which he would light to spark and smoke, giving the impression that he had just come out of hell itself. Thus, Blackbeard was born, a figure of terror and power who would go down in history as one of the most infamous pirates of all time. In 1718, the infamous pirate Blackbeard embarked on a journey through the Caribbean on his new flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. The ship was filled with a crew of fearless pirates who were ready to take on any ship they encountered. Blackbeard's first capture was the sloop Adventure, and he forced the sloop's captain, David Harriet, to join his crew. Continuing his journey, the pirates captured a Spanish sloop off Cuba, adding it to their flotilla. They then sailed north, passing through the beautiful Bahamas, and finally arriving off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, in May 1718. Once there, Blackbeard and his crew carried out one of the most daring acts of piracy in history. They blockaded the port of Charleston for nearly a week, brazenly capturing several ships and taking the crew and passengers of one ship, the Crowley, as prisoners. Blackbeard, who was concerned for the health of several of his pirates, demanded a chest of medicine as ransom for the hostages, and once delivered, the captives were released. The pirates continued their journey up the North American coast, their reputation and legend growing with each passing day. As Blackbeard's ship sailed away from Charlestown Harbor, he couldn't know that he had just set in motion a chain of events that would seal his fate in a matter of months. Unbeknownst to him, he had plucked the strings of destiny, and she was now playing a haunting melody that would soon bring about his untimely end. Blackbeard sailed his ship to his favorite inlet on Ocracoke Island, a remote and secluded spot. He even attempted to settle down there, but the call of the wild and the lure of the open seas could not be refused. Blackbeard soon left the island, his ship laden with loot gained from pillaging and plundering. As he sailed the seas, he continued to terrorize and rob any ship that crossed his path. The local sailors and merchants soon grew weary of this legendary pirate, haunting the inlets of North Carolina, causing them great losses. They took their complaints to Alexander Spotswood, the governor of neighboring Virginia, who had no love for pirates and was known to deal harshly with them. At that time, Virginia was home to two British war sloops, the Pearl and the Line. When Governor Spotswood received word that the notorious pirate Blackbeard was prowling the waters, he arranged to hire approximately 50 sailors and soldiers from these ships. He assigned the task of capturing Blackbeard to Lieutenant Robert Maynard, a seasoned pirate hunter who was known for his fighting skills, sense of duty, and honor. However, the sloops were too large to navigate the shallow inlets where Blackbeard was rumored to be hiding, so Governor Spotswood provided two smaller ships named the Ranger and the Jane for the mission. With his crew and resources in place, Lieutenant Maynard set out to confront the infamous pirate. The stage was set for the ultimate battle of the century. As the two small ships, the Ranger and the Jane, scouted along the coast in search of Blackbeard's haunts, a sense of danger hung heavily in the air. Deep down, everyone knew that they were sailing straight into the jaws of death. It didn't take long for Blackbeard to get wind of their presence. He knew that the fight of his life was coming. Nevertheless, he was a man of courage, and he had faced danger countless times before. However, this time was different. He had been dealing with the nasty disease of syphilis that was slowly and painfully killing him, and he knew that he might not make it out alive. Yet he decided to face the challenge head-on. After arming himself to the teeth, he grabbed the cannon fuses, tied them in his beard and hair, and went out to see his men. The sight of him was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. He looked like a man possessed, ready to fight to the death. With a calm and resolute demeanor, Blackbeard faced his final moments. He had always believed that death was simply the next great adventure, but he couldn't bear the thought of his men suffering the same fate as him. He knew they deserved better, so he made a bold decision. He beached and sank his treasured vessel, the Queen Anne's Revenge, and marooned most of his men. Though initially confused, they soon realized that their captain had acted out of love and respect for their lives. Despite his reputation as a ruthless and unforgiving pirate, Blackbeard had shown a rare moment of empathy. He gave no explanation for his actions other than a stern warning not to let fear get the best of him. Then, He boarded his other ship, the Adventure, and sailed into the tranquil inlet of Ocracoke Island, waiting for his fate to arrive in the form of Maynard. As the day wore on, Maynard's sloops had arrived at the southernmost point of Ocracoke. The sun was beginning to set, casting the sky in a beautiful mix of orange and pink hues that illuminated the gentle waves of the sea. In the distance, they spotted the Adventure, Blackbeard's sloop, swaying gently in the calm waters, and an unknown ship anchored next to it. Maynard decided to anchor the Jane and the Ranger for the evening as the night fell, wary of the treacherous waters that lay ahead. Meanwhile, Blackbeard and the few members of his crew he had not marooned were partying and making merry with a local trader by the name of Samuel Odell, who had arrived on his own sloop earlier that day. The night was filled with the sounds of raucous laughter and clinking glasses as the men reveled in stories of their past adventures. The following morning, November 22nd, 1718, the sea was serene and the winds were still as the first rays of the sun peeked over the horizon. The only sounds audible were the chirping of the birds and the gentle lapping of the waves against the hulls of the sloops. At 9 o'clock, Maynard ordered the Ranger to move towards the sloops. The Jane followed closely behind, its wooden hull creaking as it cut through the calm waters. But as fate would have it, the Jane ran aground, its keel scraping against the sandy bottom. The Ranger, too, ran aground, and the element of surprise was lost. The crew of the Jane frantically threw heavy materials overboard to lighten the load, while the Ranger's crew emptied their water casks to do the same. Both sloops floated again, but the opportunity to catch Blackbeard off guard had vanished. As Maynard approached Blackbeard's ship, the notorious pirate waited until the lieutenant was just a boat length away before shouting out to him, "I'm for King George. Hoist your boat and come aboard." And Maynard, aboard the Jane, replied with grim determination, "I am here for you, sir, and I shall have you, dead or alive." Blackbeard, known for his bravado and fearlessness, called for a glass of wine. He drank it in a single gulp before replying with a growl, "I'll damn myself to hell, you sniveling pup, if I show you any quarter or accept it from you. If you want me, you shall have me." Blackbeard had the advantage of superior firepower and unleashed a booming broadside of cannon fire that killed the commander of the Ranger and severely wounded 5 of his men, including the second and third in command. With the loss of its officers, the Ranger fell behind and was not a factor until the very end of the battle. The broadside also wounded many men on the Jane, but they continued to fight with incredible bravery and determination. In an amazing display of marksmanship, one of the sailors aboard the Jane fired their musket, severing the Adventure's jib line, which held the mainsail up. This slowed the vessel down, giving the Jane a much-needed advantage in the fight against the infamous Blackbeard. Amidst the chaos of the cannon fire and the thick smoke that obscured the view, Maynard's mind raced as he watched Blackbeard's ship loom closer. He knew that engaging toe-to-toe with the infamous pirate would spell certain death. He needed a plan, something clever and cunning that would offer him a fighting chance. As the cannon fire raged on, Maynard barked out orders to his crew. He instructed them to go below deck and prepare to come out fighting. When he gave the order, the crew of the Jane moved quickly, scrambling to get into position. Meanwhile, Blackbeard's ship continued to bear down on them, the sound of the cannons growing louder by the second. When the smoke finally cleared, Blackbeard looked out over the deck of the Jane, anticipating a scene of devastation and carnage. He was not disappointed. There was no sign of life on the deck, no movement to be seen. He believed that Maynard's crew had all been killed or gravely injured by the barrage of cannon fire. The Jane crept slowly towards the Adventure, her sails flapping in the wind as the two ships approached each other. Blackbeard ordered his crew to use their grappling hooks to secure the two vessels together. With the ships now connected, he was the first to make his way across the swaying plank that bridged the gap between the two decks, his cutlass glinting in the sunlight. He was itching for a worthy fight, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he landed on the deck of the Jane, Blackbeard was immediately on high alert. His senses heightened as he scanned the scene before him. He had expected to face fierce resistance, but to his surprise, the deck was eerily silent, the only sounds being the creaking of the ropes and the lapping of the waves against the hull. He strode forward, his eyes darting left and right, searching for any sign of life. However, Blackbeard's instincts were keen, and he quickly realized that something was not right. He turned to one of his most trusted crew members, a man named Caesar, and whispered a command in his ear. If the battle turned against them, Caesar was to go below deck and blow up the Jane, ensuring their enemy would not survive the day either. Blackbeard gazed upon the devastation on the deck of the Jane with a sense of deep disappointment. He knew that his own death from syphilis was inevitable within the year, and the thought of dying in such a way filled him with dread. He yearned to go out in a blaze of glory, roaring like a lion, and this was supposed to be his chance. But now, as he surveyed the wreckage caused by his eagerness to fire the cannons, it appeared that he had squandered his one opportunity to make his mark on history. As his head drooped with despair, he began to turn back toward the adventure when suddenly the doors leading below deck were thrown open and Maynard and his men charged out like a violent storm. Blackbeard realized in an instant that he had fallen into Maynard's trap, and he called out to his rival, "Smart lad." The rush of adrenaline surged through him, and the excitement of battle consumed him. This was it. His chance to roar had not vanished. He was about to make his mark and go out like the legend he was. The clash of cutlasses reverberated through the air, filling the surroundings with a metallic symphony. Blackbeard and Maynard locked eyes and began to make their way through the swarm of fighters, each step cautious and measured. Maynard knew all too well that his opponent was a force to be reckoned with. Cunning, lightning fast, incredibly strong, and deadly. Blackbeard's face split into a wide smile as he advanced towards Maynard with lightning speed. He relished the thought of this battle, and the fact that he had no intention of allowing Maynard to survive the day. As the two men closed in on each other, Maynard struck first, but his attack was effortlessly blocked by Blackbeard. With his cutlass at the ready, Blackbeard grabbed his hatchet and swung it towards Maynard's chest. Maynard managed to dodge the attack by sidestepping to the left, but Blackbeard seemed to have anticipated this move. He quickly engaged Maynard with his cutlass, knocking the lieutenant's sword from his hand. Blackbeard was poised to deliver the final blow, but Maynard had one last trick up his sleeve. He pulled a musket from his waistcoat and fired a round into Blackbeard's shoulder, knocking him back a few feet. As Blackbeard regained his balance, he pulled his hair out of his face, revealing a grin that stretched from ear to ear. Blackbeard lunged in for a counterattack. He couldn't help but feel the thrill of the fight coursing through his veins. This was what he had been waiting for, a worthy opponent. But before he could even land a hit, several British sailors came to assist Maynard. Blackbeard was now faced with 5 seasoned fighters. He laughed. This was exactly what he had wanted all along. He pulled out his pistols, allowing them each to roar one last time. The fight was intense and lasted for several minutes, but for those sailors, it must have felt like hours. One of Maynard's men, a Highlander named Demult, struck a slicing blow to Blackbeard's neck. Blackbeard recoiled for a moment, looking at the sailor with a mixture of admiration and respect. "Well done, lad," he exclaimed before the killing blow was laid upon him. Some historians argue that it was Maynard who delivered the final blow that ended Blackbeard's life, while others claim it was Demult. Regardless of who it was Maynard who cut off Blackbeard's head and took it back to Virginia as proof of his victory. As for Blackbeard's plan to blow up the Jane in case of a loss, Maynard suspected that Blackbeard had ordered this and went below decks himself. It was there that he found the pirate named Caesar attempting to light gunpowder. Without hesitation, Maynard ran him through with his cutlass, thus ending the threat and ensuring the safety of his crew. After the battle, Lieutenant Maynard made a noteworthy observation that Blackbeard had sustained 5 gunshot wounds and had been cut deeply 21 times during the ferocious fight before being beheaded. This observation speaks volumes about the intensity of the battle and the sheer determination of both Maynard and Blackbeard. So let me ask you, who do you think really won that fight? Better yet, allow me to rephrase the question. If you had not just listened to this story and someone mentioned the name of Lieutenant Maynard, would you know who they were talking about? Probably not, but if someone had mentioned the name Blackbeard, I'm quite sure your mind would instantly create a picture of a bloodthirsty pirate sailing the high seas and tormenting all those who were unfortunate enough to cross his path. It seems Blackbeard lost the fight, but won the war. By roaring so loudly, the echoes of his fight etched his name into the sands of time. I hope you enjoyed today's exciting historical story. My name is Mr. Enda, and storytelling is my passion. If you found the story engaging and love learning about fascinating events, then please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also leave a comment below if there's a specific historical event you'd like me to share. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to share more stories with you.